When a billion-dollar tech company's entire system crashed, executives panicked, consultants failed, and a janitor's 10-year-old daughter quietly walked in, sat at a keyboard, and saved everything. What did she say after? Left the CEO speechless. "We've lost everything!" The scream cut through the 17th floor of Orion Tech's sleek corporate tower like a siren. Panic followed. Monitors flickered violently, dashboards locked up, and a wave of red error messages flooded the screens. A room full of top-level executives, men and women in tailored suits, froze mid-sentence, watching helplessly as their systems crumbled before their eyes. This wasn't just a minor glitch. This was a full-scale digital catastrophe. Servers that held years of confidential client data were suddenly offline. Lines of code that powered everything from billion-dollar contracts to government systems were being corrupted in real time. The company's entire infrastructure had collapsed within seconds, like a house of cards kicked out by a silent, invisible force. CEO Richard Langston stood at the head of the table, his usually calm, commanding presence now twisted in frustration. He slammed his fist against the polished mahogany with a thud that made several people flinch. "We've got Fortune 500 clients depending on us, military contracts, global banks. This isn't just downtime, it's a crisis. Get it on the line, now." But it was already scrambling. The top cybersecurity team in the building had been called into the server room 20 minutes ago, and none of their solutions had worked. Firewalls had been breached in a way that bypassed their detection protocols. Every attempt to isolate the virus failed. It was spreading fast, adapting with intelligence that didn't seem human. Smart, silent, vicious. Langston's face tightened as his assistant whispered that the consultants were still en route, flying in from 3 different cities. Too slow. Far too slow. He could already see the headlines. Orion Tech hacked, billions at risk. Meanwhile, 10 floors down, the hum of the crisis hadn't reached the marble-tiled lobby just yet. There, the janitor worked quietly with his mop, making slow circles across the glistening floor. His name was Anthony Brooks, a hardworking single father who never missed a day. His daughter, Maya, was sitting on a bench nearby, legs swinging, her backpack half unzipped with a tangle of wires and a second-hand tablet sticking out. She wasn't supposed to be there, not technically, but it was summer break, and daycare cost money Mr. Brooks didn't have. So, with a nod from the building manager, Maya came along. Quiet, curious, and always glued to a screen. She watched as people rushed past, suits in a panic, phones glued to their ears, muttering about crashes and client data. She could feel the energy shift. Something big was happening upstairs. Up on the 17th floor, chaos continued. The top engineers had their sleeves rolled up, sweat forming on their brows as they typed desperately, trying patch after patch. Nothing worked. The virus was evolving, rewriting their code before they even had a chance to update it. One engineer turned pale as he muttered, "It's learning. It's actually learning." Langston gripped the edge of the table. "We can't just sit here. We need a miracle." Just then, a voice, small and steady, spoke up behind them. "You trusted the root function too early. That's how it got in." Everyone turned. Standing at the doorway was Maya. Her eyes locked onto the screens with unblinking focus. She held her tablet in one hand and pointed with the other. "There's a recursive overflow loop on line 78. Your sandbox isn't protected, so it rewrote the firewall. That's why you're losing control." The room blinked in disbelief. One of the IT techs near the back frowned and quickly scrolled through the lines of code she'd mentioned. His jaw slowly dropped. She's right." Langston stared at her. "Who are you?" "I'm Maya Brooks. My dad cleans your floors," she said simply. "And your system is about to lose your backups too, unless you isolate the right node and reroute the permissions override." The lead developer leaned toward Langston. "Sir, we should at least let her try. We have nothing to lose." Langston hesitated. A dozen thoughts flew through his mind. Liability, risk, appearances. But desperation has a way of breaking tradition. He stepped aside. "Clear a workstation. Let her in." Within minutes, Maya was seated in a leather-backed chair far too big for her fingers dancing across the keyboard with surprising speed. Code scrolled across 3 massive monitors as she navigated the system like she'd built it herself. The room full of millionaires, PhDs, and tech veterans watched in stunned silence. "Routing the worm into a dummy sandbox," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "Rewriting entry permissions, blocking polymorphic recursion. Now, isolate the breach path, encrypt the override key, and..." A final keystroke. Silence. Then the screens began returning to normal, one by one. Dashboards reloaded, systems came back online. The red errors faded into green checks. It was like watching a digital resurrection. "She did it," whispered one engineer. "She actually did it." Langston slowly stepped forward, his voice quieter now. "Where did you learn all this?" Maya shrugged. Online. YouTube videos. Free coding forums. I've been messing with Linux since I was 7. The room went dead quiet again. From the doorway, Mr. Brooks stood frozen, unsure whether he should be proud or terrified. Langston turned to him. This is your daughter? Yes, sir, he said cautiously. She's always been good with computers. I didn't think she just saved this company, Langston said. There was a pause. Effective immediately, the CEO continued, turning back to Maya. You have a full scholarship fund in your name. STEM mentorship, internship, whatever you want. Just say the word. Maya looked around the room, then at her father. She smiled. Can we get pizza first? The executives laughed, not the forced, awkward kind, but a genuine, stunned, relieved laugh. One of them muttered, a janitor's kid. Just did what our entire IT department couldn't. Langston smiled and shook his head in amazement. No, a genius just saved our entire future. That day, Maya didn't just reboot a system. She rewired their perception of talent, of potential, of where brilliance can come from. And upstairs, on the 17th floor of a billion-dollar company, everyone learned something new. Sometimes, heroes don't wear suits. Sometimes, they carry backpacks and code like lightning. On the top floor of Orion Tech's sleek skyscraper, tension hung thick in the air like static before a storm. The executive war room, usually a space for polished presentations and quiet confidence, had turned into ground zero for panic. A dozen high-ranking executives crowded around a bank of monitors, their eyes scanning error messages, cascading down the screens like digital blood. Code was failing, servers were crashing, and clients around the world were going dark. This could cost us everything. Millions, maybe billions? One man whispered, his voice low but shaking. CEO Richard Langston stood stiffly at the front of the room, face pale and jaw tight. A veteran of the tech world and no stranger to crisis, Langston was now staring at a nightmare he hadn't thought possible. The company's secure system, renowned, patented, and guarded by top engineers, had been breached. Not just hacked, infiltrated, violated. Langston slammed his palm down on the console. Where's the cybersecurity team? Get the best outside consultants. I don't care what it costs. Just fix it. But the lead engineer, a tired man with dark bags under his eyes and a reputation for solving the unsolvable, slowly shook his head. We've tried everything. This virus isn't just spreading, it's adapting. Our patches are being overwritten in real time. It's like, he hesitated, eyes wide with disbelief. It's like the system is learning. It's rewriting our code before we finish typing it. A hush fell over the room. You could hear the distant hum of a printer somewhere down the hallway, oblivious to the catastrophe erupting just meters away. The executives all looked to each other, every face bearing the same expression, helplessness. Langston turned sharply. Someone do something! We can't go down like this! The engineers began shouting over each other. Suggestions flew. Shut down the mainframe, roll back backups, segment the servers, but none of it worked. Every second meant more damage. Client files were disappearing. Communications with major banks had dropped. One developer muttered, "Even our backups are vanishing. How is that possible?" Just down the hall, away from the chaos, a low-level tech support agent sat at his desk with a silent prayer on his lips. He watched the alerts pouring in and felt like a front-row witness to a digital apocalypse. As he nervously wiped his brow and prepared to reroute a firewall again, he noticed movement in the corner of his eye. A small girl stood in the doorway, no older than 9, with curious brown eyes and a pink headband holding back her curls. A backpack drooped off one shoulder, and a battered tablet peeked out the zipper. "Hey," the tech said, startled. "You can't be in here. This floor is restricted." The girl didn't flinch. Her eyes were glued to the screens. "My dad's down there," she said, pointing to the elevator. "He's cleaning the lobby. But your problem, it's a recursive overflow loop, and your sandbox isn't secure." The tech blinked. "What?" She stepped closer, still staring at the blinking chaos. "See here? Line 78. You're trusting user input inside the root function. That's why it's breaking through your firewall." By then, several heads had turned. The girl's calm voice, steady and certain, carried down the hallway like a quiet beacon. Inside the war room, the senior developer heard the commotion and poked his head out. "What's going on?" The tech said awkwardly. "Says she found the vulnerability." The girl pointed again. "Your script accepts user input without validation. The virus is using that to rewrite permissions. Once it gains root access, it piggybacks through your sandbox and replicates across your network." The developer's face changed. First confusion, then realization. He ducked back inside the room and typed furiously into the console. He pulled up the line she referenced. His fingers froze. "She's right," he said, eyes wide. "She just pinpointed what we missed for 4 hours." Langston walked toward the doorway, sizing up the small girl who had everyone holding their breath. "Who are you?" he asked slowly. "Maya Brooks," she said. "My dad's the janitor." "Where did you learn to read code like that?" She shrugged. "I like puzzles, and I watch a lot of YouTube. Plus, I've been debugging Linux since I was 7. Several executives looked around at each other, stunned. Langston rubbed his temples. "All right, we're out of time. Give her a terminal." A murmur rippled through the room. Was this really happening? A kid? In charge of saving a billion-dollar company? Within moments, Maya was seated in a chair that dwarfed her small frame, typing with calm confidence. Her fingers moved fast, efficiently, and precisely. She navigated through layers of encrypted systems, isolating the malicious code, identifying patterns, and restructuring permission trees in ways even the senior developers hadn't considered. "Injecting a dummy sandbox now," she murmured to herself. "Redirecting the virus path, blocking root escalation, revoking false admin rights. Almost done." The engineers stared, half in awe, half in disbelief. Then the main monitor blinked. The red errors disappeared, replaced by green status lights. One by one, dashboards returned to normal. Access was restored, backups recovered, the virus was neutralized. A collective breath was released in the room, followed by gasps of amazement. The senior engineer slumped into his chair, stunned. She just saved the company. Langston walked over, crouched down beside Maya, and studied her expression. Calm, steady, brilliant. "You understand what you just did, right?" he asked. Maya nodded. "Yeah, but can I go get my tablet now? It's got this puzzle I didn't finish." Langston laughed, an actual, genuine laugh. Then he stood and turned to the room. "Someone get me her father. Now." Moments later, Anthony Brooks stepped into the room, still wearing his janitor's uniform, mop handle in hand, bewildered by the sight of his daughter surrounded by the company's elite. "Sir?" he asked nervously. "Is something wrong?" Langston walked up and shook his hand. "Mr. Brooks, your daughter didn't just save Orion Tech. She saved every client who depends on us. From now on, her education, college, certifications, whatever she wants, is on us. And if she ever wants a job here, there will be one waiting." Anthony's mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked at Maya, who just smiled and said, "Told you I'm good at this stuff." And that day, amid panic, crashing systems, and a boardroom full of millionaires, the future of tech wasn't saved by an expert in a suit. It was saved by a janitor's daughter, with a backpack full of potential, a brain built for brilliance, and a heart that just wanted to help. The room buzzed with disbelief, a thick cocktail of tension, confusion, and barely concealed skepticism swirling among the executives. These were men and women who had led mergers, cracked billion-dollar deals, and handled crises in every shade imaginable. But none of them had ever been upstaged by a 10-year-old girl holding a pink backpack and wearing a denim vest with flower patches. Langston, still trying to process what he was witnessing, narrowed his eyes and took a cautious step forward. His voice dropped into a measured tone. "Who are you?" The girl didn't flinch. She looked him squarely in the eye, completely unfazed by the suits, the power dynamics, or the fact that she had the entire executive wing of Orion Tech hanging on her next word. "My name's Maya Brooks. I'm 10. My dad's the janitor, and you've got about 4 minutes before this virus jumps into your backup cloud and takes down the rest of your infrastructure." A hush fell like a weighted blanket. Somewhere in the back of the room, someone let out an awkward, incredulous chuckle. Wait, are we seriously taking advice from a kid? A little girl is telling us how to fix a cybersecurity breach. The laughter didn't last long. The head of IT, a quiet man named Patel, who had barely spoken since the emergency started, finally lifted his eyes from the console. Everyone turned to him. He had the expression of a man who'd just seen a ghost and was still trying to figure out whether it was real. "She's not wrong," he said, his voice low but certain. "She's describing exactly what we missed." Langston turned toward him. "Explain." Patel stood up and walked over to the main monitor. He tapped a flashing window of code, red blocks racing across the screen. "It's a polymorphic worm. It doesn't just replicate, it mutates. Every time we patch one version, it reshapes itself and reroutes through a different protocol. That's why our defenses keep failing. It's learning faster than we can react. The only way to beat it is to outcode it in real time. You have to be faster, smarter, and unpredictable." Langston's eyes drifted back to Maya. She was already peering at the code on the screen as if she'd seen it 1,000 times before. Her fingers twitched like they were itching for a keyboard. "Can she do it?" Langston asked, not to anyone in particular. No one answered. The room was still. Even the hum of the servers seemed to quiet in anticipation. Then Maya stepped forward. Her voice was calm, but her words hit like a command. "I can try, but I need full access. Admin-level terminal control. And I need silence. No one breathing down my neck, no second guessing. I need space to think. Langston glanced at the lead engineer, whose mouth opened slightly before he shut it again and gave a single, hesitant nod. She's our best shot. Langston didn't hesitate. Give her a desk, he said. Now. The room snapped into action. A rolling chair was pushed toward the central console. A spare keyboard was unplugged and slid across the table. Within moments, Maya was seated, feet dangling off the floor, hands poised above a glowing keyboard. Her pink backpack thudded softly to the carpet beside her as she cracked her knuckles and leaned in, her eyes narrowing like a seasoned coder about to go to war. She started typing, fast, not just random keystrokes, but with a rhythm, a purpose, a confidence that silenced the room. She navigated layers of code with surgical precision, isolating anomalies, tracking the worm's logic, and writing counter-algorithms on the fly. What's she doing? Someone whispered. She's coding an adaptive counter-AI, Patel replied in awe. She's basically building a mirror virus to anticipate the worm's moves before it makes them. Langston couldn't take his eyes off her. This girl, who hours earlier had been sitting in the lobby waiting for her father to finish cleaning the bathrooms, was now holding the fate of his entire company in her hands. 10 minutes passed. The room was silent except for the soft clacks of Maya's fingers and the occasional ping from the system terminal. Monitors began stabilizing. Error logs slowed. One by one, the red alerts turned amber, then green. Memory usage is leveling, a developer called out. Firewall's holding. The worm's retreating, another said. No, it's dissolving. Maya didn't look up. Her voice was steady, redirecting the payload into a black hole protocol, isolating it in a ghost partition, re-encrypting core files, now locking it out. And then, total silence. No beeps, no alerts, just clean code, calm monitors, and blinking green status lights. It's over, Patel said, exhaling for the first time in what felt like an hour. She stopped it. The room erupted. A cheer burst forth, followed by laughter, gasps, and stunned applause. One of the engineers sank to the floor in disbelief. Another looked like he might cry. Langston walked toward Maya and crouched beside her. She leaned back in the chair, finally exhaling and giving a tired little smile like it had all been fun. You're 10 years old, Langston said slowly, and you just saved a company worth $9.6 billion. She shrugged. The logic was messy, but the worm's recursion loop gave it away. It wasn't that hard. Langston chuckled. What do you want, Maya? Anything. Say the word. She tilted her head. Can I get an extra monitor for my tablet at home? Oh, and a pizza? Langston laughed, this time loudly and freely, the stress finally cracking. He turned to the room. Somebody call the kitchen, and someone else call legal. I want to set up a full-ride scholarship fund for this girl, effective immediately. A moment later, her father, Mr. Brooks, stepped hesitantly into the room, mop still in hand. Is Maya okay? He asked, eyes scanning the scene in confusion. Langston walked over and shook his hand firmly. Your daughter just saved Orion Tech, sir, and quite possibly half the tech world. You should be very, very proud. Mr. Brooks looked at Maya, who just grinned and said, Told you I knew what I was doing. And in a world run by corporations, code, and credentials, a janitor's daughter had just rewritten the rules. Langston walked up slowly, almost in a daze, the weight of everything that had just happened visible in his tight shoulders and tired eyes. He stared down at Maya as if she were some mythical figure, part miracle, part mystery. She had just done in 10 minutes what an entire cybersecurity department and a fleet of overpaid consultants had failed to do in hours. His voice came low, almost reverent. Where did you learn to do all this? Maya, still relaxed in the oversized office chair, gave a small shrug like it wasn't a big deal. YouTube, and some free courses online, she said simply. My dad got me an old laptop from a thrift store. Super slow, but it worked. I used to take it apart, mess with the motherboard, and teach myself Linux. I just figured things out. Her words were humble, but they hit like thunderclaps in that boardroom. Langston turned his gaze slowly toward the back of the room, where the janitor, Mr. Brooks, stood frozen just inside the doorway. He had arrived just in time to hear his daughter's calm explanation, mop still in hand, his wide eyes darting between his daughter and the glowing green monitors she'd just revived from disaster. Langston took a few steps toward him, his voice still carrying weight but now laced with something new. Respect. That's your daughter? He asked. Mr. Brooks nodded nervously, his voice small. Yes, sir. Sorry, she wasn't supposed to be up here. I just brought her along because I couldn't afford a sitter. She said she was bored downstairs and asked to see the office floor. I didn't think she'd actually, but Langston raised a hand and cut him off mid-apology. Don't apologize, he said firmly. She didn't cause the problem. She saved us from it. Your daughter just salvaged a system collapse that could have taken down half our client infrastructure. He looked back at Maya, who was now spinning idly in the office chair, her small sneakers not quite touching the floor. You ever think about working here, Maya? He asked, his tone playful but sincere. Maya smirked, not missing a beat. I'm still in middle school, she replied, raising an eyebrow like duh. The room chuckled, breaking the last remnants of tension, but Langston stayed serious. When you're ready, he said, the door's open. Full scholarship, paid internship, resources, mentorship, whatever you want. You're exactly what this company needs. Someone who sees the system for what it really is, not just how it's supposed to work on paper. Maya looked at her dad, who now stood with tears forming in his eyes. He had spent years cleaning the floors of this building, unseen, unthanked, and uninvited into the boardroom. But now, his daughter, his pride, had earned a place at the table not by privilege, but by sheer brilliance. Maya turned back toward the suits, the men and women who had dismissed her when she walked in, who had looked at her like a child until she rewrote their fate in under 10 minutes. She crossed her arms, gave a half smile, and with that same unshakable calm, she said, next time, maybe ask the janitor's kid before spending $5 million on consultants. The room erupted, not with laughter, not just with applause, but with a shared realization that the world was changing. The room full of executives, engineers, and analysts had just learned one of the most humbling lessons of their careers. Talent doesn't always wear a badge or come with a title. Genius doesn't ask permission. And sometimes, brilliance shows up in sneakers and a backpack, not in polished shoes and tailored suits. Langston turned back to Mr. Brooks, shaking his hand firmly and holding his gaze. We owe your daughter everything, he said. And we owe you an apology for every time people walked past you without seeing the man raising someone this incredible. Mr. Brooks could barely speak, but Maya just rolled her eyes like any other 10-year-old and said, Okay, Dad, now you're crying. Everyone laughed. Someone called for a round of pizza. Someone else ordered a cake to be delivered. An intern even handed Maya a branded hoodie 5 sizes too big, which she threw on proudly over her tiny frame. By the end of the hour, every major system was restored. Clients were informed. The crisis had passed. But something much bigger had happened. Something that would ripple through Orion Tech for years to come. A culture had been reset, a lesson had been learned, and a janitor's daughter had done more than save a network. She'd hacked into their hearts, their assumptions, and their hierarchy. From that day on, no one at Orion Tech ever walked past the janitorial staff without a smile, and no one underestimated a young mind, no matter how small their shoes or how modest their background. Because sometimes, the hero your company needs isn't found in a corner office, but in the quiet girl who dared to speak up, sit down, and code her way into history. Some talents come in expensive suits, others come with backpacks and thrift store laptops. Maya Brooks didn't just stop a cyber attack. She rewrote the rules of who gets to belong in rooms like these. And all it took was one chance, and one keyboard. So the next time someone underestimates you, just remember Maya. Because brilliance doesn't care about job titles. It speaks through action. And sometimes, it types faster than anyone else in the room.